May 29th, 1453. Picture this. A wall. 12 meters of solid stone, thick enough to stop anything the ancient world could throw at it. Behind that wall, another wall, and in front of both, a moat filled with death. For 1,000 years, armies had stood where you're standing now, staring up at these defenses, calculating the math, and walking away. The Avars tried. The Persians tried. The Arabs threw themselves at Constantinople twice, lost entire fleets, entire generations of warriors. The Bulgars, the Rus, the Crusaders who were supposed to be allies, all of them broke against these walls like waves against a cliff. 1,000 years. Let that sink in. Not a decade, not a century, a millennium of warfare, and nobody had ever breached the Theodosian Walls from the outside. This wasn't luck. This was engineering so far ahead of its time that armies from the future kept failing against technology from the past. Let me show you why. The outer wall stood 8 meters tall, a barrier that would stop most sieges cold. But that was just the appetizer. Behind it rose the inner wall, 12 meters of limestone and brick, studded with 96 towers spaced so perfectly that archers could cover every inch of approach with overlapping fields of fire. And the moat? 20 meters wide, deep enough to drown horses, fed by pipes that could flood it in hours. 3 layers, 3 impossible obstacles, and the men who built them knew exactly what they were doing. You want to bring a siege tower? Good luck crossing the moat. You want to fill the moat? The outer wall's archers will cut your workers down. You manage to reach the outer wall? The inner wall's towers will rain death on you from above. You somehow, impossibly, scale both walls? Congratulations! You've just pushed into a killing corridor where defenders can hit you from 3 directions at once. This was the Theodosian system. It didn't just defend Constantinople, it made the city immortal. And then there was the sea. Constantinople sat on a peninsula, water on 3 sides. To the south, the Sea of Marmara, treacherous currents that could shatter a fleet. To the east, the Bosporus, narrow and exposed to the city's coastal batteries. And to the north, the Golden Horn, a natural harbor protected by the most elegant defense in medieval warfare. A chain, massive iron links stretched across the mouth of the horn, held aloft by wooden floats, simple, brutal, effective. Any ship trying to enter would have to stop, and stopping meant dying under a hail of Greek fire, that legendary Byzantine weapon that burned even on water. So here's the situation. In early 1453, Constantine the last Byzantine emperor, looks out from his palace at a city that has survived everything history could throw at it. The walls are ancient but maintained. The chain is ready. The coastal defenses are manned. But here's what keeps him awake at night. 7,000. That's all he has. 7,000 defenders to man walls. That stretch 4 miles across the peninsula, plus the sea walls, plus the harbor defenses. In the glory days, Constantinople had boasted a garrison of 30,000. Now? Plague, economic collapse, and centuries of decline have gutted the empire until it's barely larger than the city itself. 7,000 men. Farmers, merchants, priests pressed into service, a few hundred Venetian and Genoese mercenaries, and a handful of professional soldiers who remember what Byzantine discipline used to mean. Against them, Sultan Mehmed II is assembling something unprecedented, 80,000 troops, maybe more. The numbers in the historical sources range from 60,000 to over 100,000, and the truth is probably somewhere in that chaos. What matters is this: Mehmed has enough men to attack the walls in shifts, 24 hours a day, for as long as it takes. He has enough men to absorb casualties that would break any other army. He has enough men to wait. But numbers alone have never taken Constantinople. The Umayyad Caliphate threw over 100,000 men at these walls in 717. The siege lasted a year. The Arabs lost most of their fleet, most of their army, and limped home broken. Numbers don't breach 12-meter walls. Numbers don't cross moats. Numbers don't break chains. So why is this time different? Why does Constantine feel the dread that none of his predecessors felt? Because Mehmed isn't just bringing an army. He's bringing something these walls have never faced, something that will render 1,000 years of defensive engineering obsolete in 53 days. He's bringing cannons. Not a cannon. Cannons. Plural. A system. A doctrine. A wall made of guns. And he's been planning this moment since he was a teenager, obsessively studying maps of Constantinople, dreaming of the red apple, the prize that had eluded every sultan before him. April 1453. Mehmed's army appears outside the walls. The defenders watch from the towers as the Ottoman camp spreads across the hills like a disease. Tents by the thousand. Cook fires that light up the night like a second city. The sound of 80,000 men preparing for the greatest siege in history. And then, through the morning mist, the defenders see something that stops their hearts. Oxen. Dozens of teams of oxen, straining against ropes, dragging something massive toward the walls. The ground shakes with each movement. The thing they're pulling is wrapped in cloth, mysterious, enormous. The Byzantine veterans know what cannons look like. They've seen the small bombards, the siege weapons that throw stones the size of a man's head. This is not that. When the cloths come off, when Mehmed's engineers finally position the basilica, the great bombard forged by a Hungarian gunsmith named Urban, the defenders see a bronze monster with a barrel over 8 meters long. A weapon that can hurl stone balls weighing 600 pounds. A weapon that needs 200 men and 60 oxen just to move. One shot. That's all it would take to understand. The basilica fires, and the sound is like nothing any of them have heard. A thunderclap that echoes off the hills and rattles teeth in skulls a mile away. The stone ball arcs through the morning air, impossibly slow for something so destructive, and strikes the outer wall with a force that sends cracks spider-webbing through masonry that has stood since the 5th century. Constantine watches from the inner wall. His face betrays nothing. But he knows. They all know. The rules have changed. The question is no longer whether Constantinople can hold. The question is how long the greatest fortress in history can survive against a weapon designed specifically to destroy it. 53 days. That's all they have left. And Mehmed? He's just getting started. Here's what nobody tells you about Mehmed too. He wasn't lucky. He wasn't reckless. He was patient. The kind of patient that builds empires. The kind that wins wars before. The first arrow flies. When the siege began in April 1453, Mehmed had already been working on Constantinople's destruction for years. Every move calculated, every contingency planned, every weakness identified and exploited before the defenders even knew they were bleeding. Let's rewind. 1452, 1 year before the siege. Mehmed looks at a map of the Bosporus, that narrow strait connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, the jugular vein of Byzantine trade. Constantinople has survived for 1,000 years, partly because supplies could always arrive. Grain from the Black Sea colonies, mercenaries from Italy, weapons, gold, hope, all flowing through that narrow channel of water. Mehmed decides to cut the throat. In 4 months, he builds Rumelihisara, a fortress, on the European shore, directly across from an older Ottoman castle on the Asian side. The message is brutal in its simplicity. Nothing passes without Ottoman permission. The cannons mounted in Rumelihisara can reach any ship trying to slip through. A Venetian vessel tests the blockade that autumn. The Ottomans sink it, execute the survivors, and impale the captain's body as a warning. Constantinople is now an island. No reinforcements, no supplies, no rescue fleet from the Christian West. And Mehmed is just getting started. The cannons. Let's talk about the cannons. History remembers Urban, the Hungarian gunsmith who built the basilica. But here's the part the legends leave out. Urban went to Constantine first. Imagine it. A master weapons engineer arrives in Constantinople, offering to build cannons for the Byzantine Empire, the weapons that could save them, the technology that could balance the odds. Constantine can't afford him. The treasury is empty. The empire is broke. Urban names his price. Constantine shakes his head, and the gunsmith walks away, straight into the arms of the Sultan, who will pay anything, provide anything, do anything to get what he wants. Mehmed doesn't just hire Urban. He gives him unlimited resources, unlimited labor, a blank check to build the most devastating artillery the world has ever seen. The basilica takes 3 months to cast. Bronze poured into molds designed from Urban's calculations, mathematics as weapon, science as siege engine. When it's finished, the gun weighs 17 tons. The stone balls it fires weigh over 600 pounds each. But here's what makes Mehmed different from every sultan before him. He doesn't stop at one. While Urban builds his masterpiece, Ottoman foundries across the empire are churning out smaller bombards. Dozens of them. Different calibers, different ranges, different purposes, but all designed to work together. This is the innovation that will break Constantinople. Not the super weapon, the system. March 1453, the basilica begins its journey from Edirne to Constantinople, 60 miles. Normally, an army could cover that in days. The basilica takes 2 months, 200 men, haul the ropes, 60 oxen strain against the weight. Engineers work ahead of the convoy, reinforcing bridges, leveling roads, building ramps over hills. The ground shakes when the great bombard moves. Peasants flee their villages, convinced that a dragon is passing through. And behind the basilica, wagon after wagon of smaller cannons, ammunition, powder, the components of Mehmed's master plan rolling toward their destiny. April 2nd, the Ottoman army arrives. April 5th, the last Byzantine outposts fall. April 6th, the siege officially begins, and Mehmed reveals his strategy. The walls stretch 4 miles across the peninsula, 4 miles of Theodosian defenses, 12 meters high, 1,000 years unbroken. A traditional siege would spread forces along the entire length, probing for weakness, testing defenses, looking for the lucky break. Mehmed doesn't do traditional. He studies the walls like a surgeon studying anatomy. He's been doing this for years. Maps, reports, spies, obsessive analysis of every siege that ever failed here. And he's found something. The Mesotikion, a section of wall in the middle of the land defenses, near the gate of St. Romanus. Here, the terrain dips into a small valley, the Lycus River running beneath the walls through a culvert. The foundations are slightly weaker here. The angle of the walls creates a subtle vulnerability. Subtle, almost invisible. But Mehmed sees it. He positions the basilica directly opposite the Mesotikion. Then the other bombards, 14 major guns and a battery that stretches hundreds of meters, all aimed at the same sector. The defenders have 4 miles of wall. Mehmed is going to attack 100 meters of it. Every single day, April 6th. First bombardment. The basilica speaks, and the outer wall shudders. Cracks appear in masonry that has weathered a millennium. Stone dust fills the air. Defenders scramble away from sections that suddenly feel fragile, mortal, temporary. But one shot doesn't breach a wall like this. The Byzantines have engineers, too, skilled workers who've maintained these defenses for generations. Night falls, and repair crews swarm over the damage, filling cracks with rubble and timber, improvising barriers, racing against the dawn. April 7th, second bombardment. The repairs from last night? Gone. The same section of wall, hit again. New damage, deeper this time. The outer wall isn't just cracked now. Chunks are falling away, exposing the rubble core beneath the limestone facing. And now the Byzantines understand. This isn't a siege, this is an execution. Mehmed isn't trying to find a weakness. He's creating one, hammering the same wound over and over until it becomes fatal. The math is devastating. The basilica fires 7 times a day. Any faster, and the barrel might crack from heat stress. But the other bombards fire constantly, a rotating barrage that never stops during daylight hours. Dozens of stone balls per hour, all aimed at the mesotikion. The defenders repair at night. The Ottomans destroy by day. It's a race, and Mehmed has more runners. April 11th. First major breach in the outer wall. Ottoman infantry charges before the dust settles. This is the pattern. Artillery creates the opening. Soldiers exploit it immediately, giving the defenders no time to recover. The Byzantines throw them back. Barely. The breach is plugged with barrels, rubble, anything they can find. Constantine himself appears at the walls, rallying his men, reminding them what they're fighting for. But everyone can see the trajectory now. The outer wall is dying. Section by section, shot by shot, it's being erased from existence. And when it falls completely, the inner wall, the real defense, the 12-meter monster, will face the same treatment. April 18th. Mehmed orders a night assault. Wave after wave of Ottoman troops surge toward the mesotikion in darkness, torches flickering, war cries echoing off ancient stone. It's chaos, brutal and bloody, ladders against walls, and men dying in the moat. The defenders hold. Giovanni Giustiniani, the Genoese mercenary commander, is everywhere at once, directing fire, plugging gaps, turning back attacks through sheer force of will. Dawn arrives. The Ottomans retreat, leaving hundreds of dead. Constantinople still stands. But here's what the defenders don't know. Mehmed expected to fail tonight. This assault wasn't meant to take the city. It was meant to exhaust the garrison, to bleed away irreplaceable defenders, to test the weak points for the real attack still coming. 53 days, remember? We're only at 12. And Mehmed has another surprise waiting. Something that will stretch those 7,000 defenders past the breaking point. Something that defies belief. April 20th, 1453. For a single shining moment, Constantinople dares to hope. 3 Genoese ships and 1 Byzantine grain transport appear on the horizon, sails full, cutting through the Sea of Marmara toward the besieged city. Relief supplies, fresh weapons, proof that the Christian West hasn't abandoned them. Mehmed sees them too. He orders his fleet, over 100 ships, to intercept. 100 against 4. The math seems simple. The outcome seems certain. It isn't. What happens next humiliates the Ottoman navy in front of 80,000 witnesses. The Christian ships are larger, their crews more experienced, their captains veterans of Mediterranean warfare. When the Ottoman galleys swarm in, the European sailors fight like demons. Greek fire arcs across the water. Crossbow bolts rain down from the high castle ships. Ottoman vessels burn, capsize, tangle with each other in the chaos. For hours, Mehmed watches from the shore. His horse paces into the shallows as if he could will his ships forward. His commanders later swear they saw him weeping with rage. By nightfall, all 4 Christian ships slip past the chain and into the Golden Horn. The defenders on the walls cheer until their throats crack. Hope, fragile, desperate, real hope. And Mehmed? Mehmed goes quiet, retreats to his tent. His advisors whisper that the siege might be lifted, that the young sultan has finally overreached. They don't understand him at all. 3 days later, the impossible happens. April 22nd. Dawn. The defenders on the Golden Horn walls rub their eyes, squint, wonder if they've gone mad. Ships, Ottoman ships, inside the Golden Horn, but the chain is still up. The barrier hasn't been breached. No Ottoman vessel could have passed. And then they understand, and understanding turns their blood to ice. Mehmed didn't go through the chain. He went around it. Overnight, Ottoman engineers constructed a road of greased logs stretching from the Bosporus over the hill of Galata and down into the Golden Horn. A mile of improvised railway cutting across land, bypassing the water entirely. Then they dragged their ships across it. 70 galleys, pulled by oxen, pushed by thousands of soldiers, sails raised to catch the wind even on land. A fleet sailing over a hill like something from a fever dream. The defenders watching from the walls aren't looking at a tactical maneuver. They're looking at a statement. A message written in wood and bronze and impossible ambition. Nothing will stop me. No chain, no wall, no law of nature. I will find a way, or I will make one. The effect is immediate and devastating. Before April 22nd, Constantinople's defenders had one advantage. They could concentrate their forces. The sea walls along the Golden Horn were safe behind the chain, requiring only skeleton crews. Every available soldier could focus on the land walls, on the Mesoteikion, on holding the line against Mehmed's artillery. Now Ottoman ships cruise the Golden Horn, threatening landings anywhere along the harbor. Now the defenders must split their already impossibly thin forces to cover miles of additional wall. Now 7,000 men must do the work of 15,000. The noose tightens. But Mehmed isn't finished. While the fleet repositions, while the defenders scramble to adjust, the bombardment continues. Day after day, the same section, the same relentless mathematics. Let me show you what those mathematics look like. The basilica fires 7 times per day. Each shot requires hours to reload, cleaning the barrel, positioning the stone ball, measuring the powder, aiming, praying the bronze doesn't crack. But around it, the other bombards maintain constant fire. 50, 60, 70 impacts per day on the Mesoteikion. At night, Byzantine repair crews perform miracles. They fill breaches with rubble, timber, barrels of earth. They improvise a secondary barrier behind the crumbling outer wall, a makeshift earthwork called a stockade, desperate engineering against impossible odds. Every morning, the sun rises on repairs that took hundreds of workers all night. Every morning, the cannons erase those repairs in hours. The math doesn't favor courage. The math doesn't care about determination. The math says that damage accumulates faster than repair, and eventually, inevitably, something will give. May arrives. The siege enters its 2nd month. Below the walls, another war rages in darkness. Ottoman miners dig towards the foundations. In tunnels lit by flickering torches, men carve through rock and soil, inching closer to the wall's base. The plan: excavate beneath the foundations, prop the tunnel with wooden supports, fill it with combustible materials, and burn it. When the supports collapse, the wall above comes down. Mining is ancient. Mining is slow. Mining is terrifying for defenders who can hear the digging but can't see it, who know that death might be burrowing towards them right now, invisible, unstoppable. But Constantinople has an answer. Johannes Grant, a Scottish engineer, or German, the sources disagree, who understands siege warfare from both sides. Grant places drums of water along the inner wall, watches for vibrations, listens for the telltale sounds of excavation. When he finds a tunnel, he counterattacks. Byzantine countermines intercept Ottoman tunnels in the darkness underground. Fighting erupts in spaces too small to stand, men killing each other with knives and bare hands while the earth presses down. Grant floods some tunnels, collapses others with controlled demolitions, fills one with smoke that suffocates the Ottoman miners before they can escape. Every tunnel fails. Every underground assault is stopped. But here's the brutal truth. Mehmed doesn't need the mines to succeed. They're a distraction, a way to force the defenders to spread their attention, to exhaust their engineers, to drain resources from the wall that matters. The Mesoteikion. Always the Mesoteikion. By mid-May, the outer wall there has essentially ceased to exist. What remains is a slope of rubble, a scar where masonry used to stand. The inner wall is exposed now, taking direct hits from the Ottoman batteries. And still the defenders hold. Giustiniani commands the Mesoteikion personally, his Genoese professionals forming the backbone of the defense. When Ottoman assault columns charge the breaches, Giustiniani is there, armored, bleeding, refusing to yield. The stockade holds. The improvised barriers hold. Byzantine determination holds. But determination doesn't stop cannonballs. May 21st. A major section of the inner wall collapses. The breach is 30 meters wide. For a terrible hour, Ottoman infantry pour through, certain that the moment has come. Hand-to-hand fighting erupts in the gap, swords against swords, the fate of an empire measured in feet. The defenders counterattack. Constantine leads the reserve personally, pushing into the breach, fighting like a man who knows he's already dead. By some miracle, by blood and steel and refusal to die, they throw the Ottomans back. The breach is plugged. Again. But everyone can see the endgame now. The garrison is exhausted. Men who've fought for 45 days without rest, who've watched their walls crumble inch by inch, who've buried their friends and kept fighting anyway. They're still standing, still defiant, still dangerous. But they're running out of wall. Running out of men. Running out of miracles. Mehmed knows it too. His commanders urge him to negotiate. The siege has already lasted longer than expected. Casualties are mounting. Disease is spreading through the camp. Mehmed refuses. He sends one final offer to Constantine. Surrender the city, and you can live. Keep your throne in the Peloponnese. Just give me Constantinople. Constantine's response becomes legend. Giving you the city is not mine to decide or anyone else's who lives in it. We have all decided to die of our own free will, and we shall not spare our lives. The next assault will be the last. One way or another. May 28th, 1453, the 52nd day. Silence. For the first time in nearly 2 months, the cannons stop. The constant thunder that has defined every waking moment, that has haunted every dream, that has become the heartbeat of the siege. Gone. The defenders on the walls don't celebrate. They know what silence means. It means tomorrow. Across the Ottoman lines, 80,000 men prepare for the final assault. Weapons are sharpened. Prayers are offered. Mehmed rides through his camp, speaking to his soldiers, promising them 3 days of plunder if they take the city. 3 days to claim the wealth of Constantinople. Gold, silver, silk, slaves, everything behind those walls, theirs for the taking. The army roars its answer. Inside the city, a different kind of preparation. Constantine IV gathers his commanders for the last time. Greeks and Italians, Orthodox and Catholic, men who've spent centuries distrusting each other, united now by the certainty of what's coming. The emperor speaks quietly. No grand rhetoric, no false promises, just the truth. They will probably die tomorrow, but they will die defending the city that has been the heart of Christian civilization for 1,100 years. That evening, something remarkable happens. The bells of Hagia Sophia ring out, calling the city to prayer. For years, the great cathedral has been a source of division. Catholic Mass conducted there as the price of Western aid, a bitter compromise that many Orthodox Byzantines considered heresy. Tonight, none of that matters. Greeks and Italians crowd into the cathedral together. Orthodox priests and Catholic clergy conduct services side by side. Enemies become brothers. The dying empire, in its final hours, finds something it had lost: unity. Constantine takes communion. He asks forgiveness from anyone he has wronged. Then he rides to the walls, to the Mesotekion, to the breach that everyone knows will decide everything. He will not leave those walls alive. May 29th. 2 hours before dawn, Mehmed gives the signal. The night explodes. Drums, war cries, the sound of 80,000 men surging forward in darkness. Torches flicker across the Ottoman lines like a river of fire flowing toward the walls. First wave, the irregulars, Bashi bazooks, thousands of them, poorly armed, barely trained, promised plunder if they survive and nothing if they don't. Mehmed sends them first not because he expects them to succeed. He expects them to die. Their job is exhaustion. They hit the stockade at the Mesotekion like a human tide. Screaming, climbing, dying. Byzantine defenders cut them down by the hundreds. Crossbow bolts and arrows darken the air. Greek fire turns men into torches. The irregulars fall back, charge again, fall back, charge again. For 2 hours, this continues. The stockade holds. The defenders hold. But they've been fighting since midnight, arms burning, ammunition depleting, hope measured in how many more waves they can survive. Second wave, the Anatolian regulars. Better armed, better trained, fresh. They slam into the exhausted defenders with disciplined fury. The fighting at the breach becomes a meat grinder, bodies piling so high that attackers climb over their own dead to reach the wall. Giustiniani is everywhere, directing fire, plugging gaps, holding together a defense that should have collapsed an hour ago. A cannon shot from the Ottoman batteries, still firing, even now, tears a hole in the stockade. Anatolian troops pour through. For a moment, it looks like the end. Byzantine reserves counterattack. Close combat in the darkness, swords and axes, the fate of civilization decided in a space the size of a courtyard. The Anatolians fall back. The breach is sealed. But Giustiniani is down. A crossbow bolt, or a gunshot, the sources disagree, has punched through his armor. The wound isn't immediately fatal, but the Genoese commander is bleeding badly, struggling to stand. His men beg him to stay. The defenders need him, need his presence, need the symbol of his defiance. Giustiniani asks Constantine for the key to a gate in the inner wall. He needs medical attention. He'll return when he's bandaged. Constantine gives him the key. Giustiniani leaves the Mesotekion. He will never return. He dies of his wound on a ship fleeing to Chios. The defenders don't know this yet. What they know is simpler, more devastating. Their commander is gone. At the moment when everything depends on holding together, the man who's held them together has vanished. Morale cracks, and Mehmed sends his third wave, the Janissaries, elite, professional, the finest infantry in the world, slave soldiers raised from childhood for war, fanatically loyal to the Sultan. They don't scream when they charge. They advance in silence, drums beating behind them, discipline that makes the earlier waves look like chaos. Fresh troops against exhausted defenders, the best against the broken. The Janissaries hit the stockade like a hammer. And somewhere, something goes wrong. The histories argue about what happened next. Some say a small gate, the Kirkaporta, was left open after a sortie and the Ottomans found it. Some say the Janissaries simply overwhelmed the breach through sheer pressure. Some say the defense collapsed when word spread that Giustiniani had fled. The truth is probably all of these and none of them. The truth is that 53 days of bombardment, 53 days of impossible defense, 53 days of mathematics finally reached their conclusion. The wall didn't fall because of one mistake. It fell because Mehmed had designed a system to make it fall, and systems eventually work. Ottoman flags appear on the inner wall. The cry goes up, in Greek, in Italian, in the dozen languages of the defenders. The city is lost. The Turks are inside. Panic spreads. Some defenders flee toward the harbors, hoping for escape. Others stand frozen, unable to process that the impossible has happened, that walls which held for 1,000 years have finally broken. Constantine the XIV does neither. The last Roman emperor gathers what men will follow him. Sources say it was a handful, maybe dozens, and charges toward the breach, toward the Ottoman flags, toward the Janissaries pouring through the gap. He is never seen again. Later, the Ottomans will claim they found his body in a pile of the slain, identified only by the purple boots that emperors alone could wear. Later, legends will grow, that he turned to marble, that he waits beneath the Golden Gate to return when Constantinople needs him. What we know is simpler. He died fighting, as he promised he would. By dawn, it's over. Ottoman troops flood through the breached walls, spreading into the city. The defenders who haven't fled or died try to surrender. Some are spared. Many aren't. The chaos of a sack doesn't distinguish between combatants and civilians, between soldiers and priests. Mehmed enters Constantinople around noon. He rides to Hagia Sophia, dismounts, and scoops up a handful of dirt to pour over his turban, a gesture of humility before God, a recognition that what he's achieved is beyond human scale. Then he walks into the cathedral and orders it converted to a mosque. Constantinople is now Istanbul. The Roman Empire, which has endured in some form since Augustus, is finished. 53 days. That's all it took. 53 days to end 1,100 years of history, to close the book on antiquity, to announce that a new age has begun. But why? How? The walls didn't fail because they were weak. The defenders didn't fail because they lacked courage. Constantine didn't fail because he made mistakes. They failed because Mehmed understood something nobody had understood before, and that understanding changed warfare forever. So what actually happened? Strip away the legends. Forget the myths. Look at Constantinople 1453 with clear eyes, and you'll see something that most history books get completely wrong. The giant cannon didn't do it. Yes, the basilica was terrifying. Yes, it threw 600-pound stones. Yes, it cracked walls that had stood for a millennium. But here's what the legends leave out. The basilica was a nightmare to operate. 7 shots per day. That's it. After each firing, the bronze barrel needed hours to cool or it would crack. The recoil was so violent that the gun had to be re-aimed after every shot. It broke down constantly. By some accounts, it cracked during the siege and had to be repaired. One superweapon firing 7 times daily doesn't breach the Theodosian Walls. The math doesn't work. If the basilica alone determined the outcome, Constantinople would have held for years. So what actually broke the city? The system. Mehmed didn't bring a superweapon. He brought a doctrine, a way of thinking about siege warfare that nobody had ever implemented at this scale. Step 1. Isolation. Before the first cannon fired, Mehmed had already won half the siege. Rumelihisar cut the supply lines. The Ottoman navy blocked the sea approaches. Constantinople became an island, and islands eventually starve. The defenders knew from day one that no relief was coming, that every man who fell was irreplaceable, that time itself was their enemy. Step 2. Concentration. 4 miles of walls. Mehmed attacked 100 meters. Every cannon, every assault, every engineering effort aimed at the same weak point. The Mesotikion became the only battle that mattered, and Mehmed threw everything at it while the rest of the walls stood untouched and useless. Step 3. Attrition. Not one bombardment, continuous bombardment, not one assault, waves of assaults timed to exploit fresh damage. The defenders couldn't rest, couldn't rotate, couldn't catch their breath. Every night they repaired. Every day the repairs vanished. The garrison didn't break in battle. It eroded, hour by hour, stone by stone. Step 4. Combined arms, artillery, infantry, mining, naval pressure, psychological warfare. Mehmed didn't rely on any single arm to win. He used them together, each amplifying the others. The ships in the Golden Horn didn't need to assault the sea walls. They just forced the defenders to spread thinner. The mines didn't need to succeed. They just forced the defenders to divert engineers from repairing the breach. This is the revolution. Not gunpowder itself. Gunpowder had existed for centuries. The revolution was doctrine, understanding that cannons work best as systems, that concentrated firepower beats distributed firepower, that siege warfare is mathematics, and mathematics eventually wins. Let's kill another myth while we're here. The Kirkoporta, the Forgotten Gate. You'll read in some accounts that Constantinople fell because someone left a small gate open, that the Ottomans found it by accident, that one moment of carelessness ended an empire. It makes a good story. A tragic, ironic, satisfying story, the kind where fate hinges on a single mistake, where history turns on a forgotten lock. It's probably not true. The sources that mention Kirkoporta are late and contradictory. The contemporary accounts, Niccolo Barbaro, who was there, Leonard of Chios, who was there, describe a general collapse at the Mesotikion, not a sneaky infiltration through a side door. More importantly, it doesn't matter. By May 29th, the defense was broken. Giustiniani was wounded and gone. The stockade was crumbling under janissary pressure. The garrison had been fighting for hours against waves of fresh attackers. If the Kirkoporta existed and was open, it was a symptom, not a cause. One more failure in a system that was already failing everywhere. Constantinople didn't fall because of a forgotten gate. It fell because Mehmed built a machine designed to make it fall, and the machine worked exactly as intended. So what does it mean? Why does a siege from 1453 matter to anyone living today? Because Mehmed wrote the playbook. Every successful siege for the next 400 years follows the same principles. Concentrate artillery on one point. Isolate the target from reinforcement. Combine arms to multiply pressure. Make time your ally, not your enemy. The great fortresses of Europe, Rhodes, Malta, Vienna, would face Ottoman armies using this exact doctrine. Some held. Most fell. The ones that held did so by adapting, by building new defenses designed specifically to counter massed artillery, by inventing the Star Fort and the Bastion and the entire science of early modern fortification. Constantinople 1453 is the moment medieval warfare dies. The castle, the high wall, the static defense, obsolete. The future belongs to whoever has more cannons and knows how to use them. But there's something else here, something harder to quantify than tactics and technology. Mehmed was 21 years old. 21, an age when most people are figuring out what to do with their lives. Mehmed had been planning this siege since childhood, obsessing over maps of Constantinople, studying every failed attempt, dreaming of the red apple while his advisors told him it couldn't be done. When the naval battle went wrong on April 20th, his commanders expected him to quit. He built a road over a hill and dragged his ships across it. When the assaults failed, when the mines were countered, when the defenders held longer than anyone thought possible, Mehmed didn't break. He adjusted. He learned. He waited. This is what genius looks like in warfare. Not just intelligence. Will. The refusal to accept that something is impossible. The ability to see a problem as a system and attack the system's weakest point. Constantine had courage. Giustiniani had skill. The defenders had walls that should have held forever. Mehmed had a vision of how the world should work, and he bent reality until it agreed with him. May 29th, 1453. 1,000-year-old fortress falls, an empire ends, the last Roman emperor dies in a breach he couldn't hold, and a 21-year-old sultan rides into the greatest city in the world, looks up at the dome of Hagia Sophia, and knows that everything has changed. The walls didn't matter. They were never going to matter. Not against someone willing to build a wall of cannons aimed at their weakest point and fire without mercy, until nothing remained. Mehmed didn't beat Constantinople. He erased it, section by section, day by day, shot by shot, until the greatest fortress on earth became a memory and a lesson. The lesson? You don't need to be stronger than every wall. You just need to be stronger than one wall. Find the weak point. Concentrate everything. Never stop. The walls will fall. They always do.